Hello and welcome to this episode of Eldric Talks. Today I'm talking with Nick Oliveri about his self-published novels The Conjurer and Becoming the Conjurer, and his experience as COO and co-founder of his own startup. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Nick, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. I'm in sunny California, although it's gloomy and overcast this morning. I'm in sunny California right now. It is 8 a.m., bright, shiny, crisp morning. Drinking my coffee, and I'm just, per usual, I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling inspired about the future, my future. I'm feeling inspired about my work, and overall, just feeling good.
That's great. I have to start with the first question right there. So you're living in California right now, but you were born in Ukraine, and
I was.
you grew up in Massachusetts.
Yeah. I took a winding path to get here. I wasn't always into writing books, although the written and spoken word has always been a strength of mine. So I can speak very well. I can write very well. And that's always been that way. It's not braggadocio. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I've always been able to read and write and speak well. But I didn't always take that super seriously whenever I got compliments on it or things like that. So initially, I was born in Ukraine. I was actually adopted at a young age, and my parents were the first, or rather, I was the youngest baby to ever come out of Ukraine at that time.
Oh, so
Usually,
you were adopted by your parents who were in Massachusetts. They adopted you from
who
Ukraine.
lived in Massachusetts,
Oh,
correct.
okay.
So that made me, when I was adopted as a baby, just very young infant, less than a year old, I was a naturalized citizen of the United States since both my parents were born there and citizens there. But I had a dual citizenship in Ukraine as well. And at 18 years old, I chose not to renew it because I knew there would be conflict, and I didn't want to be a felon for dodging the draft as soon as I touched down there again.
Yeah.
So I haven't revisited my birthplace yet, but it's something that inspires me and it makes me feel very lucky today. I'm kind of the kid who beat the odds. Doing what I've done and being in the position I'm at, while knowing where I was born, the conditions I was born into, and the sheer unlikelihood, like the sheer weight of the odds against me when I was born, is truly inspirational every day. And so then from there on out, I grew up in a small forested suburb, about 25 minutes outside of Boston. And then I lived in New Hampshire for a year as well. So as I was growing up, I was always an entrepreneur. I was making mobile games. I was selling children's books. I was selling all sorts of things. And when I graduated high school and went off to college, I went to Bryant University. It's a small private business school in Rhode Island. And I went there with my co-founder, or the other founder of the company, which was at the time called GeoProtein. And we wanted to make the world's healthiest and best nutritious snack bar. But that vision soon changed and morphed as we tried to raise capital while just in our, being teenagers in our dorm rooms, As we were raising capital, we continued to bolster our image and our likeness and even our name. So we changed to Impact Snacks, and we became eventually the world's first consumer brand to ever use a home compostable plastic as their wrapper. It cost about 10 times as much as a plastic wrapper, but it was worth it to us, not just for the marketing value, but just to do good for the planet. So, long story short, that company became a success. We brought on over $300,000 of seed capital, and then it evolved even further into a B2B software as a service company. And I sold most of my shares of that company in early 2021. I'm still a minority stakeholder in Circa, it's now called. And it's a startup that's just doing really well and doing a lot of really interesting things with supply chains and sustainability. But so that's the roundabout answer. But here's the thing: from age 17 or 18 to age 21, I was entrenched in that startup. That startup was kind of my life, give or take. And towards the end of that, I was beginning to get some serious stress-related issues. Because as a 19 or 20-year-old kid, imagine having to fire a 37-year-old who's making 120 grand who has 2 kids. That's pressure. Imagine having to fire PR teams. Really imagine. And this is just one of many things. The team was talking behind my back. I was getting ridiculed to my face, and also behind my back. I was, as a poor manager, as a poor leader. I was 19. I built the company myself, and so everything came crashing down on me in late 2020, early 2021, and I just couldn't take it anymore. The culture became too toxic. I was just caught in this centrifuge that I could not only could I not control, but that was damaging me. So from the deep stress and that deep psychological pain came some of my best words. And that's where we get to being a writer. Is I started drafting The Conjurer, I want to say in early 2020, sometime in 2020, during the pandemic year, but I was still working, of course, because we could work remote for the startup. And the words came out so naturally. I attempted at this time many novels beforehand, and every time I failed, but I got better at it, and I got better at it, and I got better at it, and that was when The Conjurer was birthed, when I was literally at the zenith of my kind of psychological pain. And The Conjurer, if you don't know, is my Kirkus recommended, critically acclaimed debut novel. Yes, by the name of The Conjurer. And it was my debut. I published that when I was 21, and it became a Kirkus recommended novel when I was 22.
How old are you now?
I am 23 now.
Okay.
Yeah, and so since then, since the inception of The Conjurer, my debut, which launched on December 8th, 2021, I have published 5 more works of fiction, or in other words, 5 other novels.
That's definitely quite a lot. Maybe let's backpedal a little bit to your startup phase. So you got together with a buddy and you wanted to make a protein bar?
It was initially a protein bar, and it soon became a sustainability business.
Okay, but did it become that because the protein bar wasn't as successful as you wanted to, or because there was just this general trend for this other side of your business that you didn't think
all we wanted to do really was make our business as good as possible, as attractive as possible, as sleek and as fun as possible, and also we wanted to be innovative and we wanted to be different. And the protein bar market, just on its own, was too saturated. So he said, how do we differentiate ourselves while doing good that goes right alongside our brand? And not just doing good, but doing like really big things for the environment, like spending literally 1,000% more on our materials than our competitors. You just don't see that. So that kind of willpower and willingness to do something like that bodes to my character. I don't really compromise on anything, and you can tell it in my books. I just don't compromise. If I have a vision, or even if it's not my vision, but if it's a vision that I share in, I will work as hard as I can to put that into fruition and to materialize it, which is why writing novels is just so fun for me. Now, yes, of course it's painstaking at times. Of course it's a discipline. I write 1,000 words every day, but I learned discipline from the startup.
What role did you have in the startup?
I was the chief operating officer and the co-founder, and we hired about 10 to 11 employees, and it just, for me personally, things started to go south. Because I was working like 12-hour days to 15-hour days every single day, no weekends. And I was moving around all over New England, from Allston in Boston to kind of the boondocks in New Hampshire, just in the middle of the woods, to live at an investor's place, and then back to my house, my parents' house, just going all around. And then having people, being a manager and being a leader is very, very difficult of a startup or really any business, because you can't make everyone happy. And I was 19, man. I was 19, and we were bringing on over a dozen employees that I had to manage.
But the investors that you had, then they trusted you that you could fill out that role, and
They did, and they were honestly right in that trust ultimately, because the startup is still alive and well today. I'm a minority stakeholder, and those investors, I believe, are most of which are still stakeholders as well. And the company's only grown in valuation. So they had faith, and the faith was correctly placed. But at a certain point, it was my time to leave, and it was like my whole body, being, soul, and mind were telling me, like, were tugging me away and just saying, like, you will die. You will die, or you will get ill, or more ill than you already are, if you continue trying to work this hard at something that you no longer belong to.
Did you already write something on the side to calm down after your 14-hour days when you were at the startup, or?
Only on my waning days of the startup world, waning. So as my time was coming to a sunset, I would work on The Conjurer at night. And it was just such a relief, because not only could I create my own world and jump into it, but it was this wonderment in this realization of a gift that everyone has, but I have as well, that can make people believe. The Conjurer, the book itself, is all about belief. There's treachery, and there's violence, and not actually a lot of violence at all, but there's some violence, and there's some treachery, and there's political intrigue, and it's kind of like a Game of Thrones vibe. Everyone is vying for power. And then there's this lone artist who is not a self-insert in no way, but who I kind of identified with. I try to make every character sympathetic, because we're all human beings. And I don't even like to call my characters characters. I call them people, because that's my arguably greatest strength as a writer, is I create real people on the canvas. Dynamic people that if you don't root for, at least you understand them. People that are so complex that they resemble us, if not are more real than us, in our own imagination. So I love to walk the line between dreamscapes and reality. And yes, to your question, I would work on The Conjurer. As I knew more and more, it was my time to leave the company.
And The Conjurer, is this the first book that you've ever finished, or do you have?
Yes, it was the first book I've ever finished. I attempted many books before then, and I had kind of the chutzpah to say, these aren't good enough. Like, this isn't going to get me to where I want to go as a creator and as a novelist. And as someone who just loves to materialize visions, it just wasn't the right way.
How long did it take you to write that?
The Conjurer took probably 4 to 6 months to write, and then about 4 to 6 months to edit.
And did you go to a professional editor? Did you have some friends to help you with that?
I initially was doing beta reading as I was constructing the novel by people that were super helpful and close to me in basically tearing down the parts that didn't hold up, and then uplifting the parts that did hold up. And then once it was fully drafted, then I turned away from the beta readers and I hired a professional editor. And all of my books are professionally edited, because, like I said, I do not compromise. And it's not just about simple conventional errors or grammatical mistakes. It's about, how do I create a world that is more alive than our own, and people that are more alive than you and I.
And I mean, the readers or the listeners can't see this right now, but all of your books, they honestly have quite a nice cover. Did you go to a professional graphic designer or book cover designer for that too, or?
Yeah, I did. So it was funny for The Conjurer. I actually, because I'm kind of the glue when it comes to creating these novels. I bring in everyone. And so for The Conjurer, I actually used the graphic designer that we used so much for the startup. Colton was instrumental in The Conjurer's cover, and it is quite beautiful. And what I try to do with my covers, and yes, they're all professionally designed. I don't really touch them. What I try to do with my covers is I try to make you once you look at it, I want you to only gain more and more and more as you look at it. So that it could be simple imagery. It doesn't have to be super complex, like a Where's Waldo page, But I want the reader or potential reader to look at the cover and say, I'm learning as I go already, just with this one visual. Like I can surmise what the book's about, and it's drawing me in. And then, whoa, that shadow puppet casts a different shadow than what it is. That bird becomes this bird of prey on the wall in the cover of The Conjurer. Just as an example. So in all of my books, I want intrigue between the covers and intrigue on the cover.
You just said that you have a very strict routine of 1,000 words a day. Did you have your 1,000 words today already?
Considering it is 8 a.m., no. But unlike a lot of writers, so I have a fairly big following on Twitter. I have about over 7,000 followers on Twitter, and so I'm constantly asking my followers who are both or are almost all writers and or readers, and I'm constantly asking them about their routines, about their approach to work, to inspiration, to things like that. And I would say, unlike most writers, I am able to write at any point of the day because of this strict discipline I've instilled onto myself.
But do you have a favorite setup, like your desk at the nice window with a garden view and a glass of red wine? Or is it really just when the inspiration kicks in?
I don't wait for inspiration. I never do. I'm almost always inspired because the stories I create are so dire, both to me and to society. They're just so dire. They say so much, and I can't wait to put the words on the page. Now, does that mean it just flows freely all the time? Heck no. But it does. It is indicative of me. Once I sit down and get my butt in the chair, I just go. And no, I don't have a favorite place to write. I've actually moved. I want to say 7 times in the last 4 years, like fully moved 7 times in the last 4 years. So that's very turbulent for me. I know I'm still relatively young at 23, but I've seen a lot of stuff, and I've done a lot of stuff, and so I've moved a lot of places and a lot of stuff, and so to me, my favorite writing spot is just where I have a keyboard in front of me. And sometimes coffee accompanies it, sometimes a cigar accompanies it, and sometimes red wine accompanies it. Kind of like you said. Last night I wrote and I was drinking red wine, and it worked out perfectly well. I got my 1,000 in.
And when you sit down to write, what's your process like? Do you plan a lot, or?
I plan absolutely nothing. I never know when the end is coming. I can get a sense for it, but I talked to some of my other writer friends, one of my other writing friends I was having a conversation with, and he was like, so how is it going to end? Because I was talking, so I've actually drafted 10 novels, and have published 6, and I'm working on my 11th, which is actually going to be the sequel to The Conjurer, which is probably my most anticipated work to date, just because of how well The Conjurer has sold. So I don't plan anything out. I'm the opposite of that. I'm a pantser to the fullest degree. And so my approach to writing, once I get my butt in that seat and then get the keyboard in front of me, that good old word processor, man, I am a method actor. because, like I said before, my greatest strength is creating real people. Yeah, sure, I have a large vocabulary, but usually I don't use most of it unless the time really, really calls for it. Because Ernest Hemingway, for example, is one of my many writing inspirations, and he said, "Write clear and hard about what hurts." Short, short words, short sentences, short paragraphs, and so that's part of the reason. And in my method acting of being inside a character's mind truly, and I don't know if you can teach this, by the way. I'm not trying to be vain, but I don't know if you can teach my process to someone and just coach them and be like, well, you need to method act and get inside that person's mind to where you become them. I'm not sure if you can teach that. It's something that I just do, and I've been able to do. And method acting, if you don't know, is like an extreme form of getting into character by an actor. Yeah.
It's kind of like about drawing from your own experiences for the character, right? That's how I
Yeah.
understand method acting. That you try to find that you try not to imagine what that character would feel like, but try to more think about what you would feel like in that situation, and then translate it into
No,
the character.
not necessarily. Actually, not necessarily. I actually I almost do the opposite, where I create this real person, and if they're truly real, if they're truly a dynamic and complex person, it is not how I'd react always. Some characters are more similar to I than others, but overall, it's really about what it just sounds kind of mystical and a little bit ethereal, and maybe even a little inaccessible to some, but it's what the people that I create, is what they think, it's what they feel, it's how they'd react. So I guess by default, since I only have one brain and I'm one person, I kind of have to draw from my experiences, of which there are many, 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 many. A lot of pain, a lot of heartache, a lot of triumph. I have been intimate with all echelons of society, and I mean that in terms of socioeconomic status. I can relate to a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life, from the very top of the top, the very bottom of the bottom. I understand a lot. A lot of people around me have been through a lot. So yes, I draw from my own experiences, but almost none of the characters are going to react exactly as I do. They're going to react like they do. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, yeah. When you try to get a feeling for how that character would act or would react in a situation, do you also try to physically play that out in order to maybe get a better understanding for the situation?
Yes, especially in terms of facial expressions, and especially in terms of cadence and the way I hear it. A lot of what I write is what I hear, because my imagination is so vivid and can take me out of the world so quickly, out of the quote real world so quickly. Um, they, I literally method act myself. So like you said, act them out physically. I act out facial expressions. I'll look in the mirror sometimes and get the right one, and then describe it. Um, if there's a certain posture that someone is making that I want to point out in the book for a reason, showing, not telling, then I'll make that posture on the chair, and I'll fix it to where it becomes the most aligned with what I'm trying to show about that character, or rather about that person.
Do you then also work with uh, with with sketches when you do something like that? Because
I do not.
I would imagine that you have a very visual understanding of what you're writing, of the world that you're in, and of your characters.
I absolutely do. It's extremely visual for me, and the funny thing is, though, I do not do any visual art, or I do very little of it. So much of what you see from, and we can get into more of this in a bit, but I'm actually making a video book, or rather a short film, a short animated film of the first chapter of The Conjurer, which is my debut novel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's already an audiobook out for it. and I'm making a video book for it, and I'm hiring one of the best graphic designers in the UK to put it together, to make it, to animate it, bring it to life, from still images to life, for the whole 10.5 minute first chapter.
And the audiobook, is that written, is that read by you?
It is not. It is read by a gentleman named Nick Flesher, who does a fantastic job. I just didn't have the equipment or the means to do it myself. I would have, and eventually I think I will be recording my own things. But for now, Nick Flesher is just such a fantastic and a little lesser known voice actor. I know some can go for premiums, but Mr. Flesher is, he reads dramatically, he reads in a timely way, and he reads in an engaging way.
So big
So I
shout,
love his voice acting.
a big shout out to Mr. Flesher.
Yeah, Nick Flesher is great.
And the other project, is there already
Yeah.
a release date maybe?
So I had an initial. I raised a $7,200 Kickstarter for this video book, and that is going to turn out to be more than enough. Even after Kickstarter's 10% fee, it'll be just enough to be able to create this video book. And what it's going to be is basically, it's Nick Flesher speaking over this insane, really dramatic musical score in the background, while images are playing out before your eyes, and contorting themselves and wriggling around and changing lighting, and so it's basically these images brought to life.
But it's not a animated short film.
It is not, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to translate directly the literature to the screen. I didn't want to adapt anything. I didn't want to hire a screenplay writer, excuse me, or write a screenplay myself. I simply wanted to do what I've never seen done before, and that's make an animation directly based on the audiobook.
It's interesting. But do you
So
have
it's like,
is there a timeline for that? When can we expect that?
July
July.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, quite soon.
It got bumped back a couple weeks, but it's coming up quite soon. It's going to be a full 10.5 minute video of an audiobook that is visualized and brought to life. And that I've never seen done. And if I've seen it done, it's probably not been done well. And I'm just being perfectly frank with you. This is a big budget, maybe not for like a Disney corporation, but to me and to most individuals that are writers, this is a big budget production. I had to bring in 10 plus people just to make this happen. I had to have the vision for it, and it's going to be absolutely spectacular. At the very best, I'm going to be showing people the future of literature as it can be consumed. Of course, books are never going to fully go out of style, but I wanted to make the video book to just show a different way of consuming literature and to make it more accessible to people who may not like to read but still want to engage in complex stories. So that's at the best. And at the very worst, when this comes out, it'll be basically the greatest book trailer of all time and the most expensive book trailer of all time.
Okay.
So
big words for that. I'm excited.
Oh no, I do not engage in hyperbole. I do not. I don't use hyperbole to promote myself. I'm just honest, and I'm letting you know right now that at the very worst, if this is received and it's not seen by as many people as I want it to be seen by, it'll literally be the greatest book trailer of all time.
Well, we're gonna judge it when it comes out. But anyway, it feels like you really have this entrepreneurial spirit in you, and it kind of feels like that's influencing really a lot of what you do. You're doing this you've done the audiobook for that. Now you're doing this book trailer, and when I look at the books that you've written, you also write in a lot of different genres. I think Conjurer is more of a fantasy thing. fantasy book. Then you have a the monsters in my mind, I guess. Let me show up what the name was. Yeah, the monsters in my mind, a gripping novel on mental health, which is like psychological thriller. So
Yeah, that's what I would deem it as. Psychological thriller. But all my novels are literary. But they just take on different bents. And they all come from my heart. And I'll be perfectly transparent, just as I was honest with the video book and saying, like, it's definitely the most expensive book trailer ever created. It's the riskiest book trailer ever created. I have 3 books, seriously, that just don't sell. They really just haven't been sold yet. And I have another 3 books, which are The Conjurer, its prequel, and Monsters in My Mind. There's kind of a dark psychological thriller that sell very well internationally and in the States. And no, I'm not a bestseller yet. But for example, The Conjurer actually cracked the top 200 of all Kindle books in India, period. And it was number 4 in historical fiction. That was The Conjurer the other day. Number 4 in all of Amazon India.
did that just happen accidentally, or did you actively try to advertise it in India?
No. This was just incidental. People in India really love my books. And the Indian market has always been good to me ever since, like, probably 3 months ago. So the word is slowly spreading, and my engagement is slowly but surely spreading.
Do you also have a big Indian fan base on Twitter?
I would think so, but it's tough to gauge because I've over 7,000 followers, and I get, some of my posts will get 10 plus thousand impressions. And so to track that kind of engagement would be, I'm not even sure how I'd go about doing that. It's a good idea though, and it's a good prompting question to try to dive into that data and see who's really following me and engaging. But I think that there is just selling anything when you're the underdog and when you're just 1 or 2 people trying to get your vision out into the world, no matter in what form it takes. It could take the form of a book or a movie or a business, right? Or anything, all the above. When you're the underdog trying to take yourself independently into commercial success, it is a war of attrition. And in India, it's been another war of attrition where I've spent some money on promotion there, and I spent enough and I got enough to where now I can just get sales for free there because of word of mouth. And word of mouth is so key for me because I'm all about exposure right now. I'm in the exposure phase. So the other day I got 31 sales, just straight up direct to consumer, not counting what bookstores ordered. And that was a big day for me. 31 sales is a lot for a book. If I got 30 sales a day, it would quickly climb.
I think the statistic is that most authors sell around like 200 books a year on average. So just selling 30 in a day is really impressive.
Thank you. It might even be a little lower. I'm sure the median is lower. I bet the mean, the average is a little higher than it should be because some authors will sell millions of copies in a year.
No.
And most, if not a lot of authors will sell far less than 200. That's what I've understood to this point.
Most authors can probably be quite happy if they sell any books at all.
Exactly.
Oh.
But the thing is, and you mentioned my entrepreneurial spirit and my indomitable will, like I don't stop, And so after going to business school and also founding and funding and selling a startup, which is a successful startup, which is harder and more rare to do than getting into Harvard, I have learned technical skills in sales and marketing and things of the like to be able to get my work out there because it deserves to get out there. This isn't just this is not just stuff that comes from my heart. That's a pity project. This is real literature that really should be read by so many people because it reveals so much about society, about the human psyche. Every book takes you on a unique journey with real people and real worlds that are just so engaging and insightful. And if I didn't talk about my work with such passion, then I wouldn't do it at all. So I don't hold back when I talk about my books. I write them because otherwise the odds are even further stacked against you if you don't believe that you're the best. And so many writers, I mentioned my followers on Twitter. So many of them have just such self-doubt. They're like, I'm not that great or whatever. If you don't think you're very great as a writer and you're writing, you're not going to do any great things. It's almost certain that you don't anyway. I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule, to self-loathing writers getting lucky. But overall, it's the ones just as in sports, just as in boxing, UFC, NHL, anything, NBA. Every star says the same thing in their own respective domain, and that's, I knew I was the best before I became the best. And I know that as a fact. These books need to get read. They bring so much to the table. And so I'm leveraging my sales and marketing skills that I've learned in such a turbulent way. I learned them, but still, in order to package up my books and sell them and just move as many units as possible to as many awaiting hands as possible.
I really love that attitude, I have to say. It's every time I hear somebody say, "Yeah, this is never going to work," I'm never going to succeed. Yeah, well, not with that attitude, right? So I really love it that you're confident enough to just.
Well, it's a math equation. Nobody else believes that you'll do it. So if you don't believe you'll do it, you're adding on to that tenfold. But if your self-belief can outweigh the doubts of everyone else, of you going against the odds, then you have a much greater chance at doing what you want to do. So either believe in yourself or don't, or to just be a coward and don't, or just know that you're the best. And some people just aren't going to be that. Most aren't going to be that. And that's the rarity and kind of the paradox of what I'm saying. But think about just the math of it. No one believes in you. So if you don't, then you are putting the odds way out of your favor. Way out.
Yeah. And it's also the same thing as, if you don't believe in yourself, then how do you expect other people to believe in yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There just can't be any fear involved in the process. There can't be any fear involved in letting your work go to the world. Now, if there is fear, then that fear should be tempered by courage, going against your own fears for the sake of a greater purpose, right? And so it's the same in art as it is in the corporate world, as it is in academia, as it is anywhere else. You got to believe in yourself, and if you're fearful of putting yourself out there, you need to get over that fear quickly. You need to get over it.
If you could choose,
I do. Yeah. Sorry. Go on.
If you could choose between selling like 1 million books or winning the Nobel Literature Prize, which would you rather have?
The biggest prize to me is getting read and being understood. I've been misunderstood my whole life. I've kind of done things differently my whole life. I've been although I have a lot of friends and family and a great support system, and I'm so lucky to have them, still, I've been a bit of an outcast my whole life, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So the biggest honor I could receive, the biggest gift to me that I could receive is being read and received by the world, influencing the world. And getting a Nobel Prize for literature is not going to cut it, as I think and I'm giving it to you straight, okay? This might be rare. That is an arbitrary and corrupt award. I don't do that. I don't deal with that. It is not, as Teddy Roosevelt said, the critic who counts. It is not the critic who counts. It is the, so I don't, yes, of course, a Nobel Prize in Literature would be some feat, and I would be celebrating that for a long time, even though I don't celebrate most of my success. I'd be celebrating that one for a long time. It'd be a huge deal, but I'd much rather sell 1 million copies because to me, that's a higher honor than Nobel Prize of Literature, because Nobel Prizes, like I said, it's arbitrary and it's corrupt. And I don't need a critic to, even if they're highly esteemed, quote unquote, to esteem me and say you're good and give me external validation. I already know I'm good. Now it's time to get my work out there and be understood. So then those that also feel like they're misunderstood, they can connect with something, and they can connect with people that in characters that are the same as them or have gone through similar things that they've gone through. So it'd be a much bigger reward to me if I were to sell 1 million+ books than it would be to receive one of the highest honors of literature.
What made you choose self-publishing instead of finding a traditional publisher?
You're opening up a rabbit hole, my friend. But so when I talk about the video book I'm making, I wouldn't be able to do that if I was traditionally published. I'd have signed over the rights and licensing to my work. Frankly, most literary agents are very uppity. They want to hide themselves away instead of making themselves more accessible. And then the publishers are even worse. They are a lot like the music industry, where and it's happened many times. They're like, here's your book deal, we'll give you X amount, and it's usually not that much, especially since independent authors are beginning to take more market share from traditional publishers. So traditional publishers are giving out fewer and fewer and smaller and smaller advances. An author could take an advance that won't change their life in a huge way and then never get that book published despite them selling it. So now they're in between a rock and a hard place with just a little money to work with, and that's it. I need creative freedom over my books, and they are all going to want me when they can't have me because I want all of my royalties. I'm taking a bet on myself by quote unquote self-publishing. A lot of my work is, I'd argue, more legitimate than a lot of the traditional publishing industry, because trad publishing they don't take risks. And so now you need to look at it from a business standpoint. You need to look at traditional publishers from a business standpoint. They just want a marginal return to return back to their shareholders. They're not looking for something outsized. Of course, they'd like to make a killing off a book, but they're not looking to rock the boat. In fact, they want to keep the boat as stable and in as calm waters as possible. I am the opposite. I am a renegade. I'm here to make noise. I'm here to write the books that have never been written but should have been a long time ago. I'm here to explain things in a narrative way. I'm here to hopefully even enlighten people. I know that's a big word, but and I've also been, and it's not that I haven't tried either. I've been rejected from about 40 different literary agencies, and every single one I get about one every 3 days or so, because I've queried so many times. But it's always, you don't fit my mold, 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 and so on and so forth. And so my whole life has been, you don't fit my mold. So why now should I conform to something against my principles when I write my books from the heart just for them to be bastardized by some corporation? I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to sell out. It's just not going to happen. And then if you look at the economics, in the long term, I'm making more money as a self-published author because I know how to sell and hire the right team and hire the right analysts to get my work out there at a cheaper and more effective way than a lot of these big publishers that aren't willing to take any risk. They don't want any risk. They want their typical romantic comedies that they churn out every single year. They want their light, tranquilizing summertime reads, those beach reads. They want their basic YA, young adult fantasy books that don't take any risks. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. They want the next Tom Clancy. They want the next Harry Potter. It's not about they're all about iterating. Literary agents are all about iterating what's going to sell. Well, guess what? If Steve Jobs was about iterating, then we would have never gotten the iPhone. We would have just gotten a better BlackBerry with maybe like a bigger screen or some BS like that. If Henry Ford listened and wanted to just iterate, we would have just gotten maybe more horses on a carriage or found a way to just make horses faster instead of getting the Model T, which was a car and a highly accessible car. I don't know if you see what I'm saying there, but I'm trying to paint a picture that's basically I'm willing to take the risks, and I can take the risks as an individual, and through my risks, I'm already seeing an outsized return, which is full control over my creativity, full control over my royalties, and full control over my distribution. Of course, that leaves me at a disadvantage in some ways, especially distribution-wise, but otherwise, self-publishing is the way to go for me. I don't need an agent to externally validate me. Say, oh, you can sell Champ and give me a pat on the back. I don't do that. I don't do that at all.
I mean, you really seem to be in a situation where it does work out for you, so it's definitely sounds more than valid to reject literary agents and publishers, at least for now. But do you also have plans of maybe translating your books into different languages?
I do, yes. I definitely do. But there are two things that come with that. One, it's an expensive endeavor. And two, I need to find the secondary market that it'll be worth it to do that. So I'll give you an example. A bookstore in Germany and a bookstore in Italy both ordered my books in English. I need to find a nation, a non-English speaking nation, besides India. India is a special case because everyone there, maybe I shouldn't say everyone, that's a broad statement, but so much of that population is vying to speak English, and it's actually a status symbol to speak English in India. It's seen as a sign of either wealth, status, or competency, or all the above. So besides India, I need to find a tertiary market, such as Germany, such as possibly Italy, that just buys enough of my books to generate enough interest, and then I definitely translate for that nation. But until that day comes, until I get some outsized return from, for example, Germany, I'm not going to do a translation because they're highly costly, and it would be a risk that would be better spent in English-speaking markets for now, where it's already accessible.
Wow. I mean, it's probably in the end, it's probably going to be a country like maybe Japan or something,
Yeah, and that's a good question because I'm still getting my name out there, and different nations and different states within those nations have different cultures. And I know there are plenty of cultures out there and subcultures that are going to highly resonate with my message, and there are going to be many who don't. So once I find those cultures that resonate with my message, I'll definitely get a translation, at least a couple.
It's really something that people oftentimes underestimate how different countries are when it comes to perception of different books. Like, for example, Ken Follett always talked about how he is rather unpopular in the UK, but like super popular in Germany. And it's something, you read those books and you think, oh, these are good books, they should work everywhere. But some countries just have a different cultural focus, and they are just not interested in, for example, the classic hero story. They want to hear a book about class, or they want more of a drama, and it's sometimes really surprising how big that difference is, especially when there's just a border between those two countries, but all of a sudden it seems like completely different worlds.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I was saying it comes down to culture. I just need, back to that war of attrition kind of thing. I need to just slowly and surely test out different subcultures and get my work out there enough to where people talk about it. And I'm going to get rejected by a lot of cultures throughout the world. And then once I'm widespread enough, I will get accepted by many cultures throughout the world. And that's when translations will come about, yes.
Would you maybe be willing to give us a bit of a financial breakdown of about like how much money you invested in the books when, for example, it comes to the editor or to the cover design, and maybe even how much you made back?
I would completely be willing to give you a breakdown of especially expenses. I've learned a lot because I spent over 5 to 6 grand on creating the Conjurer itself. That's why the cover is so beautiful, and that's why the formatting is perfect. But from there, I've made less and less expensive books for
Did
the
you
same quality.
did you just feel that you spent the money in the wrong places and for the first book, or
Yeah, yeah. Like for the Conjurer, I went with a hybrid publisher, which I didn't need to go through. And although maybe I did need to in a certain sense and be like, well, this is now I learned from you guys. Now I can take the torch from here. Overall, it costs so breaking it down like just brass tacks.
hmm?
It costs anywhere from $100, which is very cheap, to what should be more like in $300 to $500 for a great cover. And you need a great cover, not a good one.
No.
There are too many books out there. There are too many books out there. If your cover is grainy, or if it doesn't say a lot, or if it's not intriguing, then forget about it. You're not going to sell. You just won't. So, spend on your cover. Spend on it. Don't be thrifty. You need to take that risk. And if you don't have the money, then make the money to spend on the cover. And I'm sorry to say that. Editing. Get a professional editor. They cost anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000. That's just the truth. My longest manuscript, Monsters in My Mind, it cost me a little under $4,500 to edit. And that includes developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, and so on and so forth.
Do you go
But
with a solid price with a solid
it's
price
usually
for that,
word.
or per word?
Yeah, it's usually a price per word, which is why so Monsters in My Mind is around an 84,000 word manuscript, which is on the longer side of a lot of books.
Mhm.
And it's my longest book I've ever made, so I spent $4,000 on an editor, and I spent $900 on the cover because I paid. And like I said, I'm just being transparent right now. People are going to want to hear this. That cover, I paid $60 an hour for a graphic designer. And if you go on to Amazon right now and you look at that cover, it is striking. You might not like it. Not everyone's going to like everything. But it is absolutely striking and beautiful. And I based it off Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's one of my favorite painters. Rest in peace. And so, yeah, it's going to cost you thousands if you want to produce a really well done book. My lowest cost book was probably Her, in which I didn't hire a developmental editor. I only hired a line editor to fix conventional mistakes because I felt like I wanted to get that book as raw as possible. And it was kind of an experiment there. And as I sell more of my top 3 books, my other 3 books will get more attention as well. So people are going to want to hear more from Nick Oliveri, not just from the Conjurer series or not just from the unique Monsters in My Mind take.
How many drafts do you go through when you create a manuscript? Do you just have the first draft and then hand it off to the editor, or?
No, it's usually a couple. I don't totally redraft the whole thing. Frankly, I think that's a waste of time. but it's definitely not ready the first time. Almost definitely not. But as I've written more, I've actually gotten a lot better with my pacing while I draft, and I've gotten a lot better with my developmental structure while I draft. So it actually has taken me less and less drafts to make a good work of fiction as I write and as I go
No.
forward. So now I'm plodding along on my 11th novel that I've ever written, and I feel like I have a really good sense of pacing and how the book is going to be perceived literally as I write it. So my brain is working on that many dimensions as I go from it. So I always say, like, but here's the thing. It's true in wine too. I've worked at a few wineries in my day, and I always say with wine you're never wrong. It's an art, especially as you taste it. It's up to you what you taste, right? So as a writer, you're never wrong. If you think you need 10 drafts to really make it stick, to bring your point across and to make a great story, you're not wrong necessarily. So that's what I would say on that.
And from that $5,000 or $6,000 that you spent on the book, would you say that you have made all the money that you invested in your books completely back, or?
I've recouped my funds on I think 4 out of the 6 of my books. So 2 books I'm still waiting on recouping those investments. But really those are long-term investments. And it's art, so it's a little less predictable than say a clothing line where you can track everything very well and everything is straightforward. This is a long-term investment. So 2 of my books, I don't believe I've made money on. Now, as an artist, I'm going to be honest, I'm not the tightest bookkeeper. But what I can say is I know what I have at my disposal. I know what I've disposed of. And then the more money I spend on promoting and selling my books, the better I get at it. So basically, the more efficient my use of funds is, and I will soon recoup every investment.
How exactly do you promote your books?
Right now, I do book signings. I do live events. I promote them on social media, Instagram and Twitter, and I also I have a data analyst that works for me that manages my Amazon ad campaigns daily, and I pay him twice a month. And I have a sales team in Eastern Europe that does B2B, business to business sales, and tries to get me picked up by libraries and independent bookstores alike, because I distribute through Ingram Spark as well.
And you just said that you're writing your 11th novel right now.
That's correct.
Do you already have a at least rough release window for that?
So I have a lot of decisions to make, but so basically from December 8th of 2021 to February of 2023, I had 6 novels come out. So that's less than 2 years. I believe anyway. Yeah, it is. I'm not a math guy, but February 2023 was the release of the prequel Becoming the Conjurer, which actually is a 5 out of 5 on Amazon. And it's been getting the best reviews I've ever gotten out of any book that I've ever sold. So it's really, really, really something. Definitely check it out. And if it's not coming from my mouth saying that, it's coming from reviewers' mouths. But I have a lot of decisions to make in terms of releases, because I have a lot of books on the shelf right now that I think I want to save until 2024. And I think my next big goal as an author is to release to people who are waiting for my book. Instead of releasing it and then marketing it, I want to do pre-orders and release to an audience. So it's either The Painter, which has already been professionally edited and is on the shelf. I have The Girl in the Attic, which is just drafted. And then, of course, I'm drafting the sequel to The Conjurer, which is definitely my most worldwide anticipated book. That may or may not come out as my next release. And so basically, I want to slow my release schedule down, no matter how much I write per day, because I want more anticipation for my works. So 2024 looks like a more likely release when I'll probably release 2 to 3 books in 2024, and those 2 books definitely are going to be the sequel to The Conjurer, which I'm very excited about, and many others are too, and a book called The Painter, which the name may change, but it's kind of a romance mixed with literary fiction.
And you also brought a few paragraphs from your book, The Conjurer, to read to the audience today, right?
I did. I really did. I'm very excited about it. This is what I'm going to be reading is a very special chapter to me. I've actually rewritten this like 11 times, I think. And it's part of my debut novel, which is near and dear to my heart because it was the first time I got to pick up one of my own physical copies. And so this first chapter, just to contextualize it, is describing the Conjurer and what he does for the kingdom of Idaza, the kingdom that he lives in. And he acts as basically their primary media source. It inspires a lot of intrigue whenever I read it or whenever someone else reads it. So I'm very happy to share it with you right now, if that's okay.
Okay. Ready when you are.
Okay. The Conjurer, Chapter 1. Power is a dance of shadows. Mikala was the shadow puppeteer. In a way, Mikala was the shadow himself. The whole kingdom of Vidaza gathered under the sacred light of the ceremonial flame, beneath the leather sandals of Mikala, who looked down on the whole of the city from his platform with his crew. He was out of the audience's sight, high above and behind them. Mikala, as the Conjurer, stood in front of the ceremonial flame, projecting his massive silhouette and his every movement for the masses to drink in. It was his shadow and his voice that permeated the eyes and the ears of the audience. His body was the colossal shadow puppet projected onto Mount Chuksat, the giant rock formation that acted as the glowing orange screen for the countless commoners. The commoners of Idaza were bound not by each other, but rather by their belief in the stories told to them. They were united in the blessed arcs Mikala created with the flame and used to entrance them week after week. Subconsciously, all of the commoners needed a tether, a fabric, a careful, mythical lace that bound the legends of Idaza. The nobles had an answer for that, and it came in the form of the state-appointed Conjurer. The Conjurer's job was to make them believe. Belief kept the gears turning. The Conjurer projected the stories with shadows, and it was these legends that ruled the many hearts and minds of the kingdom. Mikala's stories motivated every harvesting hand and inspired every nursing mother whose babies would grow up and swing hammers and swords for their kingdom, with those same stories embedded in their blood and memory forever. In short, it was the stories and paintings in Mikala's heart that kept the great kingdom running in beautiful unison, smoothly, peacefully, collectively. So that was that. Thank you for letting me share. That was the first part of the first chapter of The Conjurer. And like I said, it's explaining the Conjurer's role in the society. And really, the Conjurer, among many other things, is an extended allegory of media literacy in today's modern landscape.
Thank you. So if the listeners want to find you anywhere, where can they find you and how can they get their hands on your books?
So I am building out a new storefront for myself right now online. But in the meantime, Amazon.com is a great place. All my books are there internationally. Whether you want them on Kindle or paperback, they're all there. On Audible, The Conjurer is available. Target.com will also ship out orders to you. There are a few books of mine on the secondary market, which you can get for cheap that are used, such as eBay. And how to find me online is I'm very active on Twitter and somewhat on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Nick Oliveri, no caps, no spaces, and the O is a 0. So Nick 0 Oliveri. And my Twitter handle, if you don't just look up Nick Oliveri, is Faulty Harb, FAULTYHARB. So that's where I'm at right now, and you can catch me there.
Thank you very much, Nick Oliveri. Thank you very much for joining us for this interview, and best of luck to you.
The pleasure is all mine. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And to any of the listeners out there, I hope you found a nugget in here. I hope I was able to inspire you to something. So thank you so much for having me once again.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Eldric Talks. You can find all the links to the socials and the books that we talked about in this episode's description. New episodes are coming out every Friday. For more information about upcoming episodes, head over to eldric-talks.com. That's eldric-talks.com for more information about upcoming episodes. Thank you again for listening, and see you next time.